So very recently, Penuel hosted ABBA AYALEW on his podcast. And ABBA AYALEW shared some of his reasons why he doesn't believe in African spirituality. Now, ABBA and AYALEW and I don't agree about a number of things, which I'm quite vocal about those things. And we were actually supposed to have a discussion with them. They were going to come to the Eastern Cape. We unfortunately were not able to have it as the event was cancelled. But we can at least agree on this particular subject where he actually shares why he doesn't believe in the term African spirituality. Because if it's African, how can then we go and define it in terms of spiritual terms? Or if it's spiritual, how can we define it in terms of the physical terms? So this is a video we're going to look at, and I'm going to give some commentary towards the end, but please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy our videos. So let's have a look at the video and then we'll give our commentary.
How about we add a spiritual element to all of this? And when I say spiritual element to all of this, I'm not speaking African spirituality. I don't believe in African spirituality. I believe it's a concept that does not exist. It does not make sense. You cannot justify it. You cannot explain it. Because if you're going to explain African spirituality, then you're going to have to talk about European spirituality, Asian spirituality, American spirituality, Scandinavian spirituality, and kanti yini lento yomoya? Is it not a universal common thing? What is spirit? Why must it be labeled with the flag of a country? Why must it be labeled with the color of people?
So there are a number of things that are wrong with using the word African spirituality. Now, first of all, our ancestors, the people that came before us, never believed in such a concept. Number one, people would subscribe to their local sort of spirituality. And I shared with you guys last time that even within the Nguni tribes, you'll have Xhosas believing that they originate from a particular place, which Zulus say they don't originate from a particular place. And so it's impossible for us to say that we have the same spirituality when it's different in the way that we interpret it. But also think about it like this. If people have a different spirituality, let's say white people in Europe should have their own, let's say people in China should have their own, the question is, are we created by the same God? Because if we're created by the same God, then the way that we would relate to that God should be the same. We can't say we're created by the same God, but the way that we define him is different. That's completely false. I think that if there is one God, his essence cannot change, it cannot be shifted, and therefore one of us should be wrong about the essence of God. But I think another point that's important is that when Christians say that Christ is the only way, we're actually affirming that universal idea. If spirituality is universal, if there is one God, then we believe that there's only one way to get to that God. I mean, imagine if there was one God, but then there were like 7 different ways of going to God. This would then create a problem to say some people might find it easier to get to God because maybe God has given them an easier way. But for some people, you know, they have to see dreams, they have to speak to snakes under the water, you know, they have to be terrified and live in fear. Whereas some people have a spirituality maybe that doesn't come with so much fear. It doesn't come with things like witchcraft. So that would be completely unfair of God to do that. And this is why we say, if spirituality is universal, if there's one God, then there should be one way to go to God. It's not Christians being arrogant, but actually we're affirming the same thing that ABBA AYALEW is affirming, is to say that it's universal. The spiritual world cannot be defined by the physical world. If you define your spirituality on the basis of skin color and race, then all you're doing is just importing racism to something that doesn't actually accommodate it, because the spiritual world is what actually makes us all the same. All of us one day will go into the afterlife. All of us are born. All of us are created by the same person who loves us equally, who created us in his image. And so for me, this idea that spirituality is universal is actually more affirming of Christianity, because if you look at spirituality as a whole and you look at types of spirituality, if you look at Islam most of the time will call you to be more like an Arab. You dress like an Arab. If you speak Arabic, then you can better understand the Quran. What about Judaism? Judaism is inviting you to almost like Jewish culture and Jewish customs, That's not what Christianity invites us to do. I mean, even what people are now promoting as African spirituality, it's just spirituality that's for a specific group of people. It's actually Christianity that is always coming with a universal message that invites all people into a relationship with the same God, and that we can worship him the same way, that we can go to him the same way through Jesus Christ. So if spirituality is universal, then that is much closer to Christianity than it would be to Rastafarianism, which is almost African-based, if you will. It'll be definitely much closer to that idea than Hinduism, Krishna consciousness, things like yoga are all Eastern-based, right? And people who always say, no, these people have their own spirituality, is actually, those people are actually false to say that we have our own spirituality. Because ultimately, if we're created by the same God, we should be able to interact with that God or to go to him the same way. And as Africa Mhlophe always says, there is no ethnically based spiritual path. In other words, even if it's venerating the ancestors, everyone around the world venerates the ancestors. Even the Romans had what was called the cult of the emperor, where they venerated all the previous emperors up until the emperor that was ruling. So even things like believing in multiple gods, those things are universal. They're not uniquely African. And so this is why we believe that Christianity calls us actually to unity as people in the world. We're saying we're all equal. We're saying we're all created by the same God. We're saying there's only one way to go to that same God, because we're not racializing it. We're not saying that, this spiritual path is only for certain people and that spiritual path is for certain people, but we believe that Christianity is for all men. It really invites the whole world into this relationship with one God that loves us in an equal way. So in a sense, when people begin to talk African spirituality, all they're doing is just dividing people. All they're doing is separating people on the basis of race. I mean, how do you exclude people from God on the basis of their race? I've had someone come to our channel and say, what has happened with African spirituality? You see white people being sangomas. And that's basically what is wrong with this idea of African spirituality, is to say that you are excluded from the divine, you are excluded from the spiritual on the basis of your race. I mean, that to me is no different than apartheid. We can call it spiritual apartheid. And I don't believe that God would create us and then create sort of these separate ways of coming to him. Then God would be racist. So these are my thoughts. In agreement with ABBA, AYALEW. I think that for me, Christianity definitely affirms the idea of universal spirituality, but also saying that all of us can go to God in the same way, and God has made a way for all of us to get to him. This is Bisrat for Africa, a channel dedicated to giving you Christian commentary on religious and spiritual matters. We'll see you guys on the next video.